So I really want to make 2 points about Nietzsche and epistemology. One is that he's anti-foundationalist, but anti-foundationalist doesn't necessarily mean anti-knowledge. It only means that you're anti-knowledge or anti-truth if you're already a foundationalist, right? You see this in philosophy a lot. Kuhn doesn't believe in progress. Yes, he does. He's just his model of progress is different from the positivists. So the first thought about Nietzsche is that he's anti-foundationalist, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's anti-knowledge. But the second thought about him is that he's much more at home with history than with natural science. And what he has to say about knowledge seems to me to be really quite plausible for history, but we might worry a bit about whether it really covers the case when we think about natural science. So first of all, he's anti-foundationalist. What is foundationalism? Foundationalism is the idea that you solve the problem of knowledge by finding a foundation. So in Descartes, it's the cogito. Once you get hold of, your own existence, you can quickly pass to the existence of God and the other things that he establishes in the Meditations, and off you go reconstructing knowledge on a firm basis. And the crucial thing is that it's the same for everybody, right? The cogito is an exercise that everybody can do. Everybody can sit around and go, ooh, what do I know? Well, I know that I'm thinking, okay? So the idea is that once you set off down, once you adopt Descartes' foundation, you end up with the one true body of knowledge. And then you've got the empiricists. For the empiricists, the foundation is empirical experience rather than introspection. And you might think that this would give you diversity, right? Because everybody's empirical experience is different. But the thing that the empiricists, so this is Locke, Berkeley, Hume initially, the thing that they write about isn't so much empirical experience as the way we organize it, what we do with it, the way we, what our minds do with the sensory input. And again, it's the same story for everybody. So everybody should end up with the same view of the world, the same general science, because everybody's mind works the same way. And the champion of this, of course, is Kant, who manages to convince himself that, well, we can't actually know what the world is like independently of our attempts to understand it, but everybody schematizes the sensory input the same way. So even things like space and time and the idea of causation, these are features of the mind, but they're the same for all minds, at least all human minds. And so we all live in the same world, and in principle, we can all have the same knowledge, see that world the same way, because we all organize the sensory input the same way. So the crucial thing about foundationalism is it leads to uniformity or unanimity, right? Because everybody has the same foundation, everybody builds on it the same way, and so you get uniformity of knowledge. What Nietzsche, Nietzsche doesn't argue. So this is the death of foundationalist epistemology is a bit like the death of God, in that Nietzsche doesn't exactly argue for it. He kind of says, well, surely every sensitive, intelligent person who's been paying attention must realize that this game is over, right? If you've had your philosophy education, you've trekked through Plato and Aristotle and Descartes and Hume and Kant and Hegel and the rest of them, and you've done all that. You must have noticed the forcing, the undischarged assumptions. So, If foundationalism doesn't work, what have we got instead? We've got perspectivalism. Perspectivalism is the idea that no one of us can have reliable knowledge of what the world is like, but we all see the world from different angles and we can talk to each other, right? So we can combine perspectives. And of course, combining perspectives doesn't give you the ultimate truth, but the more perspectives you combine, the better informed you are, the more error you can weed out. So, foundationalists and perspectivalists both think that the quest for knowledge is unending, right? Nobody thinks that there will come a day when we know everything, although in special contexts people sometimes say that. But with perspectivalism, there's no ultimate guarantee that we're even on the right track. But at least if we have lots of different viewpoints, we can at least hope. So that's perspectivalism. And as I say, if you're a foundationalist, perspectivalism looks like skepticism, but that seems to me to be a kind of foundationalist prejudice. Now, it seems to me that this kind of perspectival story is most plausible in things like history. So if you think about what it's like to be a history student, you have to read history written from all kinds of different perspectives. So somebody might write a history of England. Somebody else might write a history of Britain. And the decision to write a history of Britain rather than a history of England, is going to have some political, ideological, cultural origin, and it's going to give you a different history. Churchill wrote a history of what he called the English-speaking peoples. Now, why would you do that? Why would you, think that the English-speaking peoples form a natural unit, right? So there's a sense of, the naturalness of the unit. Well, because he has a particular ideological bent. One of my favorite examples is there was a Franco-German history textbook. I think it was quite limited kind of scope. I think it was sort of 1950 to the present or something. But the idea was that rather than having French historians writing histories of France and German historians writing histories of Germany, you would get together and write a school textbook that would be common, obviously, translated, but it would be the same for both French and German students. This is obviously part of the European integration project, right? It very obviously has an ideological bent, but reading it, will give you angles, you will see juxtapositions, you will see facts combined in ways that you would never see in a French history or a German history. So even if you despise, even if you're an ardent nationalist and you despise the European integrationist project, you're still going to want to read this because you're going to learn from it. So perspectivalism does seem like a kind of accurate description of what it's like to study history. But it's not an accurate description of what it's like to study physics. If you study physics, you don't have to read all the different perspectives. You just study the established theory. There is just, except at the frontiers, right? At the very, once you've got your undergraduate degree and your MSc, and then you're halfway through your PhD, you eventually encounter the point where physicists disagree with each other and where kind of ideological differences come in. But everybody understands that situation to be kind of temporary, and that it should stabilize in everybody adopting one true theory, right? That's the experience of natural science in modern times. I think there's a reason for this. And this is me rather than Nietzsche. And if you want to know where I'm getting it from, the answer is R.G. Collingwood. But I think there is a reason, and it's there aren't general laws in human affairs, right? So in physics, because there are general laws, you've got your E equals mc squared and your F equals ma and all the rest of it. You can identify those. Once you've got them, and that's your theory. Whereas in history, there aren't general laws of history. Each historical episode has to be understood afresh in its own contextual specificity. So you have to make decisions, and the decisions won't be made for you by a system of general laws. So you have to look somewhere else to decide what to study, how to organize it, what categories, what concepts. And where do you look? Well, you look to your ideology, you look to your cultural convictions. So those are the 2 points I really wanted to make about Nietzsche and knowledge. One, he's anti-foundationalist, he's perspectivalist. And two, the perspectivalism really works better. I mean, it's really compelling as a description of what it's like to study history. It needs work if you want to extend it to the natural sciences. People do, of course. I mean, there are, of course, there are scholars who are impressed by Nietzsche and who extend what he's doing right the way out to pure maths, right? You can do that, but it takes a bit of strong writing. So essentially, one way to think about this, and this is a general point about philosophy, is if you want to understand what philosophers are disagreeing about, you generally have to look outside philosophy. You have to look at what extra philosophical influences or images or paradigms they have in mind. So if when you talk about knowledge, you mean history, you're likely to be a perspectivalist. And if when you talk about knowledge, you mean physics, probably you will have intuitions that drive you towards some kind of foundationalism. And this is a kind of Nietzschean thought, actually, because rather than berating each other with our intuitions, it might be better to just pause and think about where we're getting our intuitions from.